They're words that outlive their own meaning. They are repeated so often that eventually they come to mean everything, and therefore nothing at all. One such word is Gnosis. Whenever we enter the territory of the hidden underside, we inevitably encounter a term that has become fashionable to invoke with or without reason in semi-sophisticated conversations over a glass of champagne. Gnosis. For some reason, it is now treated as a convenient intellectual license for absolute freedom from all restraint, as though one could simply declare, "I am an artist. This is how I see it. I have received a personal revelation, and therefore the rules of grammar, logic, and existence no longer apply to me." Those in search of an easy path will have to be disappointed. Gnosis is not the whim of an unruly ego, nor is it a passing inspiration produced by a cup of strong coffee. It is a rigorous, almost surgical system of direct knowledge. And if you have decided to look behind the curtain of reality, be prepared to discover that reality has no intention of adapting itself to your fragile aesthetic expectations. Many people innocently imagine that the tree of the Sephiroth is a sunlit Garden of Eden, where pink cherubim flutter among the branches, and complimentary metaphysical gingerbread is distributed at the summit. I am afraid I must disappoint you. The Sephiroth are not a rainbow, and to be perfectly honest, some of them resemble architects far more severe than any earthly system of education. The tree is a vast cosmic security system. It protects itself from our ignorance. It ruthlessly forces us to conform to its standards. It educates through crisis and filters out anyone who attempts to pass without a ticket. The divine light has no intention of indulging us. It burns away everything unnecessary, like an impeccably tailored but infernally tight Chanel corset. Either you fit the form, or the system rejects you. And here we approach the central secret that terrifies so many neophytes. The tree of evil is first mentioned not in the black grimoires of sorcerers, but within sacred scripture itself, as part of the single tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The ancient book of the Zohar expresses this with remarkable psychological precision. If a person is worthy, it becomes good. If they are not worthy, it becomes evil. Do you understand? Malkuth, our earthly reality, is itself the tree of knowledge. Evil is not hiding in the bushes, waiting for us with horns. Evil is born at the very moment when a person is inwardly unprepared, when they have not yet grown enough, have not yet become worthy of receiving the world in the proper way. Our ego turns a divine instrument into a weapon of destruction. That's why the biblical texts observe, with such melancholy restraint, that all human descendants carry this mark within them. We possess no innate metaphysical stability. We are constantly thrown from one side to the other, because the other side, the Qliphah, that rigid shell of egoism and separation, has been inseparably woven into our nature from the moment of birth. We are all formed from this compromise between light and shadow. And the purpose of this series is not to run from that shadow screaming, but to examine its structure carefully, patiently, step by step. When a neophyte first begins practical work with the Qliphah, the ego almost always makes the same childish mistake. It unconsciously expects the reverse side of the tree to absorb its old parent-child projections. It expects the Qliphah to punish, to educate, to heal, or, at the very least, to tempt dramatically, like the villains of a Gothic novel. I'm afraid that is another disappointment. The Qliphah possess none of the educational enthusiasm we so readily attribute to them. The Qliphah are an anti-structure. They have no plan for you whatsoever. They do not care whether you become wiser, purer, more spiritual, or closer to God. In fact, they want nothing from you at all. The Qliphah are not an army of enemies. They are simply an environment. Much like radiation, you may enter that landscape and emerge transformed, having discovered an inhuman strength of spirit. You may enter it foolishly and burn yourself to ashes. or you may pass through the labyrinth and recover that spark of divine light which was once lost. But the reverse side will neither save you nor protect you. It simply exists. A severe teacher whose only lesson is the fact of its own existence. Liberation here is not the dramatic destruction of the outer world. It is the far more ordinary and infinitely more difficult escape from the prison of your own conditioned consciousness. And the death of old illusions becomes the final threshold of initiation. If we strip away the excessive mystical fog that is gathered around the Kabbalistic texts, the stages of the Qliphah reveal themselves as a remarkably precise map of humanity's encounter with the deepest layers of the unconscious. It is a labyrinth in which we meet, one after another, every rejected, forgotten, and repressed part of ourselves. And these encounters unfold according to the familiar laws of psychological adaptation, from shock to acceptance. What is remarkable is how closely this entire journey corresponds to what modern psychology has described for decades, using an entirely different language. The journey begins with Nahemoth. The first encounter is shock. Here, the ego suffers its first devastating blow, coming face to face with the archetype of the shadow. Everything long buried begins to rise from the forgotten cellar of the psyche. Everything painful, everything shameful, everything rejected in order to preserve a respectable image before the world. Then comes Samael and Arabzarak. Shock gradually gives way to anger. Confronted with everything it has refused to acknowledge, the ego erupts in rebellion. It rages against fate, against God, against the cruelty of existence, against parents who failed to love enough, against an unjust world. Anyone, so long as it does not have to admit that the anger belongs to itself. Then comes Tagirian, Golochab, and Ga'ag Shibla, the stage the alchemists called Nigredo, the great inner melting. The ego begins to bargain with its own shadow. It is a painful farewell to the person one used to be. Old habits have already become poisonous. The new self has not yet found its form. Then comes Dath, the bridge across the abyss, the point at which the old identity is finally dismantled, not destroyed, taken apart, piece by piece. Then come Satariel and Gagiel. Depression, not violent despair, but overwhelming silence. The arguments have ended. The anger has burned itself out. The bargaining is over. There is only the dark mirror of still water, and the quiet recognition of the true scale of one's own illusions. Finally comes Thomiel, acceptance, singularity. The false self has fallen away. Conscious and unconscious no longer struggle for dominance. They begin to exist as a single whole. The shadow is no longer feared. It has been understood, integrated, purified of its distortions. There are no questions left, only presence. The four circles of Nahemoth. When the gates of Nahemoth open before you, whether through profound self-analysis or through one of life's brutal crises, do not expect horned demons to leap out of the darkness. The reverse side works far more subtly. You are not attacked. You simply, almost without noticing, begin to slip into its reality. In psychoanalytic terms, this condition is known as the dead mother syndrome. It is a world of ghosts, where you're forced to confront the carefully constructed illusion you have spent years creating about yourself. Nahemoth tears away every mask. Suddenly, you begin to see aspects of your own nature you never suspected existed. This descent is not an explosion. It is a slow freezing over of the soul, and that frozen landscape can be understood through four distinct circles. The first circle, the emotional glacier. The first thing you experience upon reaching the depths of Nahemoth is anhedonia, the complete inability to experience pleasure. Your emotions freeze. The world rapidly loses its color, becoming a silent black and white film. But the most frightening part is not the pain. Pain is still a sign of life. The cold of Nahemoth is the absolute ringing absence of anything at all. The second circle, narcissistic emptiness. Suddenly you discover a vast hollow running through the very center of yourself. You continue going to work, drinking your coffee, smiling politely at colleagues, yet inwardly, you feel like an empty machine, mechanically repeating actions that no longer possess meaning or purpose. This is the cold, glass-like gaze of the dead mother, turned inward upon herself. It is the same emptiness experienced by children who grow up in the emotional world of a psychologically immature or deeply traumatized mother. The third circle, spiritual infantilism and stagnation. The impulse to grow, to struggle, or even to choose gradually disappears. Every possibility receives the same weary answer. Why? Nothing matters anyway. It is the condition of an embryo that never leaves the womb, a womb that no longer nourishes, but merely imprisons. Nahemoth whispers its seductive promise. Abandon your individuality. Surrender. Dissolve into the ocean of Leviathan. Return to the peaceful nothingness where responsibility no longer exists. The fourth circle, the cycle of illusions. To ensure that you never fully awaken, Nahemoth replaces reality with convincing substitutes. Not spectacular hallucinations, not terrifying visions, something far more ordinary. Endless scrolling through social media until dawn. The endless acquisition of things that bring no joy. Relationships that imitate intimacy without ever becoming real. These are the stillborn children of Nahemoth. Pseudo-desires that imitate life, while quietly leading nowhere. Nahemoth is relentless as a court bailiff. Yet this is precisely its therapeutic purpose. It drives the ego to the absolute limit, to complete psychological bankruptcy. The task of anyone trapped within this frozen landscape is not to perish there, but to understand it completely, to study the cold, to acknowledge the emptiness, to stop escaping from it through shopping, through social media, or through endless distraction. Only then, when you finally feel the solid, icy ground beneath your feet, can you perform the one act that truly matters, to push away from the darkness, to reclaim the imprisoned sparks, and return, once again, to the world of the living. If, in Nahemoth, the ego froze within an emotional glacier, then the next station of the Shadow Labyrinth awaits us under an entirely different climate. Welcome to Gamaliel, the realm of the dark waters and the reverse side of Yesod. Most people imagine spirituality as something pure, sterile, and infinitely removed from the passions of the flesh. Kabbalah takes a far more realistic view. It is the Qliphah of Gamaliel that channels into our side, into the ordered world of the Sephiroth, the raw energy of libido, wild, untamed, primordial, instinctive, the chthonic force of life itself, without which life could never exist. But Gamaliel is not about the healthy continuation of the human family, nor is it about the quiet tenderness of domestic love. It is the Red Sea of passion, where passion exists for no purpose other than itself. It is the sudden eruption of those ancient desires long imprisoned within the unconscious, breaking through the dam of respectability and crying out with irresistible force. We are here. Feel us. Gamaliel is a brilliant and utterly ruthless manipulator. Having channeled this raw sexual energy into the human world, the Qliphah immediately sets an elegant trap for the ego. It provokes, and then eagerly feeds upon, our hidden perversions, our compulsive mental arousal, and our obsessive preoccupation with sex. In essence, Gamaliel is a vast reservoir, A psychic pool filled with our own rejected thought forms, forbidden fantasies, and repressed sensuality. Everything that a respectable gentleman or a perfectly composed lady in a Chanel suit would never dare acknowledge in the light of day quietly sinks to the bottom of that pool when night falls. Marcel Proust was a master at dissecting this hidden underside of fashionable society. Behind the impeccable manners and refined conversations of the Verdurins salon, there was always that same suffocating, insatiable hunger of Gamaliel. People devote an extraordinary amount of energy to appearing saintly, while deep within their own unconscious, the dark waters slowly dissolve the last remnants of their morality. The great existential nightmare of Gamaliel is that within this sphere, desire can never truly be satisfied. Its very nature ensures that every encounter with the object of our longing only intensifies that longing, making it still more consuming, still more destructive. This Qliphah plants within us an unending existential hunger, a profound sense of inner emptiness. Yet under no circumstances does it ever offer fulfillment. It is the eternal, capricious, tyrannical cry of "I want," mistakenly projected onto a particular person, an object, or a dream. But the moment we finally obtain what we believed we desired, Gamaliel immediately strips it of all value, leaving us alone with an even deeper void. The task of practical inner work at this stage is to recognize that this hunger cannot be satisfied from the outside. We must stop feeding that pool with our fantasies, understand that passion is only a mirror reflecting our own inner lack, and learn to master this raw, vital force rather than allowing it to turn us into slaves of an endless simulation of pleasure. Some conversations never truly end. They simply withdraw into memory, where they go on thinking without us.